Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you guys know about an opportunity to learn some of the most important skills in life, if not the most important skills. And those are the skills of learning and doing so rapidly, effectively, and easily. You see, guys, I'm putting on a completely free 60-minute webinar that you guys can check out, where I will be going into my absolute best memory tips, learning tips, and speed reading tips so that you can immediately begin applying them and accelerating your learning of anything and everything. All you need to do to claim your spot in this free webinar is visit jle.vi/webinar. We have showings at many different times throughout the days for every time zone, but you have to log in and claim your spot. So that's jle.vi/webinar, and I really look forward to seeing what you guys achieve. This episode is brought to you by Organifi. You guys, one of the only things that every nutritional expert that we've had on the show seems to actually agree on is that we all need to eat more vegetables, eat more greens, eat organic, cut out all the processed junk. Well, who has the time, right? Who has the time to go out, do the shopping, make the salads, make the juices, make the smoothies? And that's what I love so much about Organifi. Their product is an all-organic green juice. It has all of the nutrients that you need. It tastes absolutely amazing, and it's made by wonderful people who I consider to be personal friends. And as listeners of this show, you guys can actually save 20% on your first order. And all you have to do is go to Organifi.com. That's ORGANIFI.com and use the coupon code SUPERHUMAN at checkout. Greetings, Super Friends, and welcome to a particularly fun episode of the Becoming Superhuman podcast. We are joined here today thanks to a review from Coyote Joe from the US of A, who says, with a 5-star review, a gem in every episode. I discovered the Becoming Superhuman podcast about a year ago and it's become one of my favorites. Jonathan covers an immense range of topics and yet never loses track of the central theme of the program. Virtually every episode leaves me wanting to research the subject more thoroughly, read the books written by the interviewee, or try out something new in my life. For a knowledge-hungry person like me, it's a dream come true. He goes on to thank me for giving homework in the episode and that I don't always agree on all the points, but instead of wasting time, I remain gracious, apparently, and open-minded. Well, thank you very, very much for the review, Coyote Joe. And for those of you guys who have not left a review, well, please do, because I don't have any more to read for next week's episode. Okay, on to today's episode, you guys. Today we are joined by Susan Peirce Thompson, Ph.D., who is an adjunct associate professor of brain and cognitive sciences at the University of Rochester, but she's also more well-known for being an expert in the psychology of eating. She's the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Bright Line Eating, The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free. She is president of the Institute for Sustainable Weight Loss and the founder and CEO of Bright Line Eating Solutions. That is a whole lot of stuff. Let me just breathe for a moment. So, Susan and I had an incredible conversation about some of the cutting-edge research that she's been doing and her experience. We talked about her past dealing with drug addiction and then dealing with obesity. We talked about the psychology and the neuroscience behind the food that we eat and the not-so food that we eat and how it is setting so many people up for failure. And then we talked about some other very interesting stuff. I definitely learned some stuff that I'm going to apply in my daily life. And I think you guys will as well. If you love this episode, which I hope you will, go ahead and send us a tweet and let us know what you think or comment on the blog post at superhuman.blog. Now, without any further ado, let me introduce you to my latest super friend, Susan Peirce Thompson. Susan, welcome. I am so happy to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, Jonathan, I'm great. How are you?
I am also fantastical. You were just telling me that you were here in Israel. I'm so sad that I missed you. Tell me a bit about that.
Oh, yeah. I was there, and I think it was 2003. My husband and I went to visit the Baha'i shrines in Haifa, Israel. And it was a beautiful trip. We have friends in Tel Aviv, and we stayed in Tel Aviv for a little bit. And it was lovely. It was really a treat to get to go to Israel. I went to an AA meeting in a bomb shelter in Tel Aviv, like literally in a bomb shelter. It was a trip.
Yeah, these are one place in the world experiences, I think, that you have. You know, the Baha'i Gardens being probably one of the more beautiful places, I think, on the planet.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
That is awesome. Susan, so I tried to cover your bio in the intro, but as always, I do not do the guests on the show justice. So before we get back into the conversation we were having before I hit record, give us a brief overview of who you are and what you do.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm the founder and CEO of Bright Line Eating, which, it's a weight loss company, but sort of from a different angle. We really help people who have struggled their whole lives to lose weight, or even just more recently, but just can't manage to win that battle. And I teach people how their brain blocks them from losing weight. I'm a neuroscientist, tenured psychology professor, and I come to this work from my own wicked history with addiction. I think of the weight loss game as really an issue of food addiction in many cases, and certainly it was for me. And I'm a formerly obese woman, and been in a right-sized body now for like 14 years, which puts me...
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think it puts me in the top 1/100th of 1% of successful weight loss maintainers. Like nobody does that. Nobody is obese and then becomes slender and stays there for 14 years. It just doesn't happen. So yeah, I'm proud of that, but I'm also grateful, right? Like it's just a big bullet to dodge to not have to be dealing with that anymore.
Definitely. Wow.
Back in the day, I was a drug addict as a teenager. That was my effective weight loss solution when I was, in high school, was crystal meth and then cocaine. And then I dropped out of high school and then crack cocaine. I became a prostitute, burned my life to the ground. At the age of 20, I got clean and sober and stopped using drugs. I haven't had a drink or a drug in 23 years.
Wow, good for you.
And that's when I became obese because the food just substituted for the drugs. And so one of the messages I like to say is that having been addicted to most, not all, but most of the most addictive things in the world, food is harder to kick than crack cocaine. I could just say that.
Wow.
And I don't mean, apples. I mean, the junk food that is peddled as food these days is, if you're trying to eat healthy, it's harder than abstaining from crack cocaine to avoid that crappy food. It's harder.
That blows my mind. But then as I think about it, I'm thinking to myself, humanity discovered cocaine kind of by accident and nature made it the way that it did. Whereas there are teams spending billions of dollars of research money to figure out how to make Doritos more addictive. So I guess it makes sense, right?
Yeah, actually. I mean, if you think about the parallels, right? If you think about what a drug is, right? Coca leaves are actually not addictive. There's actually a published scientific paper showing the non-addictiveness of coca leaves. Like in the Andes, hikers will take the coca leaves, put them in their cheek and chew them a little bit. And it makes the cheek a little numb and it gives you a little lift, but it's like maybe the equivalent of drinking half a cup of caffeinated tea. Like nobody gets addicted to them. But when you take the inner essence of that coca leaf and then you refine and purify it into that fine white powder, you've taken a healthy, innocuous plant and you've turned it into a drug. And it's the same with heroin, right? Poppies are fine. You could sit in a field of poppies and eat them all day long. And you would actually fail a urine test for opium. You would fail it, but you wouldn't have gotten high. You wouldn't have gotten addicted.
Wouldn't have been worth it.
Exactly. But you take the inner essence of that poppy plant and you refine and purify it into that fine brown powder and you've got heroin. You've turned it into a drug. And that's exactly what sugar and flour are. We take plants like beets or corn or, wheat or rice or flour or rice or potatoes or whatever. And then we take the inner essence, not the whole plant, the inner essence of it, and we refine and purify it into a fine powder. And we're creating drugs. We're creating drugs. And as a neuroscientist, I'll tell you there's no difference. It's like your brain lights up just like it does to heroin and cocaine.
So that's what I wanted to ask you, because I'm always telling people this when they ask me, why don't you eat wheat? And well, what if it's gluten-free? And, what if it's brown sugar instead of white? And I'm not a neuroscientist and I don't play one on the internet, but I always tell people, if you look at I believe it's fMRI, right? The fMRI diagrams of someone who's just eaten a bunch of pixie sticks or had a wonderful, lovely donut and someone who's just snorted a line of cocaine, they're shockingly similar. I mean, you're a neuroscientist, so how similar are they really?
They are. They're similar. I mean, they're the same, essentially. I mean, if you want to get down and dirty, I actually think that dopamine downregulation in the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. These are the reward, addiction, sort of motivation centers of the brain. I think the dopamine downregulation is actually a little worse in the obese person than in the heroin or cocaine addicts, but pretty comparable. I mean, if you look at them, pretty comparable. And I don't know if it was a statistically significant difference, but to my eye, it looks a little worse. But yeah, we're talking about the same response where basically you hit the crack pipe, you shoot the heroin into your veins, you snort the line of cocaine, or you eat the donut, you chow down on the pizza, whatever it is, and you've delivered to that part of your brain a rewarding experience that's so far off the charts of anything your brain evolved to deal with that it feels like a tsunami to your brain. And it basically says, like, whoa, dude, that was excessive. We don't need anything like that kind of stimulation around here. And you keep doing that to us, we're going to adjust things on our end, like basically tune down the amplifier so that we don't respond as strongly next time you do that to us. And you keep hitting it hard like that, and the brain turns down the dopamine response. But it does so by, not permanently, but semi-permanently rewiring the brain to not respond to pleasurable stimuli like that. And now you feel bleak unless you're getting a hit. You feel itchy, you feel not okay, you feel desperate, and you've got to get that hit, not to get high, but to get normal. Now you need it to get normal.
Yeah, I mean, that's how people end up chasing the dragon, so to speak. And probably also why the first time you use these substances, you're never going to match it.
Yeah, totally. Chasing that high, for sure. And sugar and flour and stuff, they're wicked drugs, not just because they're powerful, they are, but also because they're everywhere, because you're going to get a lot of social pressure to consume them. Like, just try not eating pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving in America and see the pressure that you get. Like, you're not going to diet today. Come on, you're not, like, it's as if it's 1950 and, someone is saying, I don't drink on New Year's Eve. And someone's saying, come on, you're not going to be a teetotaler on New Year's Eve, are you? And it's like, today we wouldn't do that to that person. We'd say, oh, okay, you don't drink. Okay, right? We'll find you some sparkling water, right? But forget about it. With sugar and flour, like, you still get tons of pressure. And then the cues are just off the charts. Like, the cues that are trying to entice you to consume those foods, the visual cues, the television commercials, the smells, all of it, the logo. I mean, they're spending bajillion dollars trying to make sure that we stay hooked on this food. And the occasions for eating it are like pretty much all day, every day. So it's really, really hard to quit. It's just really hard to quit.
Right. And it blows my mind. The dissemination of information is so poor, despite what so many folks like yourself, like Rob Wolfe, are out there doing at what we're doing. There are still so many people. I was in the States recently, and, you go into a food court and you see a ton of options that everyone knows is unhealthy. The pizza and the pasta, people are starting to realize, and obviously the burger and fries. But then the only healthy option is Subway, and people are there getting a foot-long roll made of whole wheat bread as the healthy option, ostensibly. And you just know that there's like 300 grams of carbohydrates or something in there. And it's incredible. People don't realize that chemically, it all breaks down to the same thing. That is the same as eating the entire pizza. The pizza might even be better for you because all the fat might actually blunt the insulin absorption. It might be better to eat the pizza.
Yeah, it's all just so bad. It's really sad how processed our food supply is. And it's, you really gotta swim upstream. If you live in any kind of Western society, city, whatever, you have to do things really differently than everyone around you to be healthy these days. It's really kind of sad. And one of my big messages is that this isn't hitting everybody equally, that there's a continuum of susceptibility to addiction, and that absolutely goes for food addiction too. And, 1/3 of people are just not susceptible to this at all. They're just not. their brains don't wire this way. And then 1/3 are moderately susceptible and 1/3 are heavily susceptible. And not understanding that, I think, is creating a lot of mass confusion, because people who are low on the susceptibility scale are saying, I think you should just, use XYZ strategy, fill in the blank that works for them.
Portion control.
Right. And they just have no freaking clue what it's like to have a brain that's highly susceptible to this stuff. They have no idea. And a lot of them are doctors, nutritionists, they're writing books. A lot of them are our biggest health educators. They've always been slender. They've never had the genuine kind of issue that some of us have. And it creates a little bit of a buyer's beware market, because if your brain is highly susceptible to this stuff, and most people, if they have addictive susceptibility, they know it. They know they have an addictive personality. And you got to kind of read the sort of advice and the programs of people and look for the clues of like, how susceptible are they? Like, how bad has their food issue been? And if their brain's not as susceptible to yours, then the solution they're peddling isn't going to be potent enough for the way your brain works. Flat out. It's just not going to be.
Definitely. And I think that is really improving in the very recent years. I mean, even folks, again, I'll bring up Rob Wolfe just because I love his work and he's a friend. But, when he came out with the paleo solution 10 years ago, it was just eat these foods, don't eat these foods. And now he's come back and said, hey, I may have oversimplified it for a lot of people. White potatoes are going to be like crack. And for other people, they're not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so, you have to do the testing and you have to figure out what's going on in your body when you eat these foods. I think that's changing. At the same time, for years, before I was running this podcast and before I had the opportunity to interview folks like yourself, I was guilty of this. And friends would ask me, in college, how are you so fit? And I'd say, well, I just don't eat this addictive food or that addictive food and I work out and that's it. And if you do the same, you'll have the same results. And what I've realized is I have different triggers. First off, I realized that I'm pre-diabetic and I can no longer enjoy that luxury of having one donut once a week because it just shoots me into an insulin overload situation. Mm-hmm. But also that I'm genetically predisposed to this and not that. I think that's a very interesting point.
Totally. Know thyself. Know your brain. Like, how does your brain tick?
Absolutely. So I want to get into that because obviously you come at this from a different angle than anyone we've had on the show. We've had neuroscientists and we talk with them about learning, and we've had dietitians and we talk with them about nutrition. You come at it from a very different perspective, which is understanding what's going on in the brain when we eat these foods. So I'm going to intentionally ask you a very open-ended question, which is, what's the deal there?
What's the deal where? What do you mean? What's the deal with what?
Well, I mean, how is neuroscience involved? And, it may seem like an obvious question to ask people now that we've already covered the dopamine and all of that, but how is neuroscience involved and how can we hack neuroscience to, I don't want to use the term increase our success with dieting, but maybe increase our success with food and health? Yeah.
Well, do you know that Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax? I'm the Lorax, I speak for the trees, right? I'm Susan Peirce Thompson, and I speak for the people who have brains that are highly susceptible to food addiction. And these are the people that I care about. I'm one of them. I'm a ridiculous 10 plus on the susceptibility scale. And I know what it's like to be, eating with tears streaming down your face, not wanting to be eating anymore, like stuffed to the gills and can't stop eating. So what I want people who have brains like that, like brains like mine, to understand, and it's, like I said, it's about 1/3 of the population. We're not talking about a small number of people here, is that your brain is resistant to leptin. Leptin is the hormone that governs your eating behavior. It's the hormone that tells your brain, you got enough food on board. It's time to stop eating now. And it's time to go get active because you want to take all the fuel you just ingested and go build a hut or kill a wildebeest or find a mate or do something, helpful with all that fuel that you just ingested. If your brain can't see your leptin, doesn't matter how heavy you are, you could be 500 pounds and your brain believes that you're starving and it's going to force you to seek out highly rewarding calories like your life depends on it because it believes that it does. And high insulin levels and high inflammation cause leptin resistance. So you could be morbidly obese and your brain isn't seeing any of the leptin that all that fat is secreting. And you actually will show all of the physiological markers of starvation. With 400 extra pounds on your body, you have the brain of a starving person. And that's why you can eat a full dinner, maybe a dinner that would be fit for 3 normal sized people. And then as you're moving to the couch to watch TV, you need a bag of chips. And when the chips are gone, you need a gallon of ice cream. Like, that's why you can eat that much food, is because your brain can't see your leptin. It's not your fault. Your brain's been hijacked by the wackadoodle foods that are available today, the not food foods. And I also just want to say, like, the only way out of that pickle is to abstain from sugar and flour entirely with a bright line. That's why my program is called A Bright Line. Is just a clear boundary that you just don't cross. And it's the same way that someone who's smoking 3 packs a day and has just been diagnosed with lung cancer and wants to live to see their grandkids get married needs to quit smoking. Like, the nicotine moderation program is not going to work in that scenario. It's just not, right? We don't tell someone like that to be sure to cut back, way back on their smoking. You got to quit smoking if you have that kind of history, right? So it's not a popular truth. It's not a popular idea, but there are some foods for some people that just a clear, bright line is the way to go, a no tolerance policy. And I don't eat sugar and flour ever. And I teach people how not to do it. And I want to say it's not that easy. Like, you need a lot of support. Mm-hmm. It's not trivial. We're talking about a condition that's killing about 63% of us prematurely. Like, there is nothing that's killing more people than this.
Only old age. That's the only thing.
Not even that, Jonathan. They're not getting old age.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this from a lot of different perspectives. I just read The Willpower Instinct because I realized, 80% or 90% of the time I am able to remember that if I actually opt for the dessert, I can actually opt for dessert. If it's dark chocolate, I can get away with dessert. If it's fruit, I can get away with dessert. But if I give in and I eat that piece of cake, I'm just going to feel like crap. And 80% of the time that works. And the other 20% of the time it wasn't working. I have to say, though I didn't enjoy the book that much, it's been incredibly effective because it's kind of, once you know how the magician does the trick doesn't work on you anymore. And so I don't know if you've read the book, but a lot of what she's talking about is what's actually happening in the brain. And kind of once you know the tricks that your brain is playing on you, you're kind of like, oh, okay, here's what's happening. I'm discounting future cash flows, but for calories, and all that stuff. But I want to ask you, what are some of the strategies we can use to consistently say no? Because I would hope everyone in the audience listening, if you've been listening for a month on this podcast or for 3 years, you shouldn't be eating that shit. So it's just a matter of putting the rubber where it meets the road.
Yeah. Well, I have a Bright Line Eating Bootcamp. I really encourage people to not do it alone because, my guess, Jonathan, is you're not super high on the susceptibility scale. That's my guess, just having talked with you. And you could take the quiz and find out for yourself. But once you know the magician's tricks, the trick doesn't work on you, that's not true for an addict. You can understand yourself and your brain backwards, forwards, upside down and still not be able to say no. And, you can say no sometimes, but not consistently. And unfortunately, the small slip-ups lead to a very slippery slope if you have that kind of brain. So there's kind of a full frontal attack that's needed. So the first thing is to kind of surrender and reach the point of uncle, I give up. I need a different way. I'm willing to do what it takes. I always say that Bright Line Eating is not a program for all the people who need it. It's a program for all the people who want it. You have to want it. If someone, because sometimes people say things to me like, but I want to eat my pizza and ice cream. And I'm like, so go ahead. I'm not in the convincing business. Do what you want to do. I'm here to help the people that are on the floor crying, writing letters to God saying, please help me stop eating. I don't want to be fat anymore. I want to be thin and I can't get there. What's the solution? Those are my people. So number one is surrender, want it. And then number two is, adopt this sort of approach of I'm not going to have any more. You kind of have to decide that you're going to quit smoking, right? Until you've made that decision, all of the quit smoking communities and whatever, they're not going to do anything for you if you haven't decided to quit yet. So you got to make that decision. And then it does take a lot of support. So it takes a community of people who are doing it too, because you get so much pushback on a daily basis from your coworkers, your friends, your family, the society you live in. I mean, even months in and you're super successful, then people start saying, you're getting too skinny. You're not going to keep losing weight, are you? Do you have AIDS? And it's like, you still have 30 pounds to go to get to goal weight. Yeah, you've lost 100 pounds, but you're not too thin yet. And it's shocking how society will push back in ways both subtle and overt to keep you from, adopting this, a healthy new lifestyle. So it's really important to get a lot of support. And there's a lot of behavioral neuroscience built into Bright Line Eating, sort of at every level. Everything from, the 5 strategies that replenish willpower in the moment. So what do you do when you're at a party and it's cake time? Mm-hmm. What do you actually do then? How do you deal with it when you're traveling? How do you navigate restaurants? I mean, there's just so much involved. It's like food, we have to face it. In Bright Line Eating, we do 3 meals a day. So that's 3 times a day. You got to kick that tiger and take him for a walk. And there's a lot involved in successfully getting that tiger back in the cage and living a healthy life in between times. There's just a lot to it, So
not just kick the tiger, make sure you take him for a walk. Because a kicked tiger is not doing anyone any good. You gotta make sure you get the leash on the tiger, people. Take notes. If you're not taking notes, I love that metaphor. So, Susan, I want to take the opportunity. I always love geeking out with neuroscientists. I want to take the opportunity to ask you some of your favorite brain hacks. What are some of the things that you do to keep your brain operating at peak performance, besides obviously diet and nutrition?
Oh, Jonathan, I feel like I don't know what. I'm just okay, I meditate. I get to I get a good night's sleep.
These are the only really good answers,
I know, but it's it seems so, trivial and trite. And I just feel like, oh, where's the genius in that? But it's okay, but do you? Are you meditating for 10, 20, 30 minutes every day? Do you? Because it's one thing to go yeah. But it's another thing, for me, the rubber meets the road when it comes to getting a good night's sleep. Because I have 3 little kids. I get up at 5 a.m. And that means a good night's sleep means the lights need to be out between 9 and 10. And when I kiss my kids goodnight at 8:30, it's really hard to get the lights out between 9 and 10. After that, it's okay, I might want to have sex with my husband. I probably need to brush my teeth. I write a gratitude list. I write in a 5-year journal. I, forget it. If I check email, it's over, right? So for me, the neuroscience hacks are, okay, my brain needs enough sleep. It really does. It needs enough sleep. So I know it sounds trivial, but that's actually the most important stuff is meditation, exercise, sleep.
It doesn't sound trivial because every single high performer we have on the show, for the most part, mentions one or both of those things.
Yeah.
And I even did a video recently. Not recently, now it's years ago, but it was basically, can you actually change your brain with meditation? Because people think of meditation as kind of like a fresh coat of paint on the wall, when in fact, meditation is rebuilding the house. And so I talked about, cortical gyrification and all these different changes to the way that the neurochemistry of the brain change, but also the structural and functional reality of the brain change. And it's tremendous. I mean, short of crystal meth, I can't think of anything that actually changes the brain as much as meditation.
There you go. All right. So I offered the, obvious ones. Let me offer one that's not obvious. So research shows that when someone eats a lot of highly rewarding food, like the standard Western diet, right, and they gain weight, what happens is that their brain calibrates to this new higher weight as their new set point, right? And if they try to lose weight, what the brain's going to do is compensate in all kinds of ways to get that weight back on. Even though it's unhealthy and it doesn't make any sense, this is what the brain does. The tactics are going to be mostly hormonal, but even to the extent of changing the amount of calories that are burned in a muscle contraction so that no matter how much exercise you do, you're just not going to burn as much as you used to. Lowering your thyroid hormone levels so that your basal metabolic rate goes down. Increasing ghrelin, lowering leptin so that you're feeling starving and craving and thinking about food 24/7. It's going to force you to get that weight back on. So the key is, how do you coax your brain to accepting a lower body fat set point as you lose weight, how do you allow your brain to kind of go along with that process and not fight you? And it turns out, here's a little hack. It's not a popular one, but it's true. It turns out that the blandness of your food has a lot to do with that.
Really?
Yeah. If you're eating really tasty, sexy food, your brain is going to fight you as you try to take off that weight. If you keep your food really simple, like steamed green beans or steamed green beans, salmon is fine, but let's not doctor it all up. Like, keep your food simple. Your brain will go right along for the ride and adopt a lower body fat set point again.
No kidding. Now, okay, I have clarification questions here. I'm sure that the salt and sugar content are important there. What about umami and fat content? I mean, you said salmon is perfectly fine.
Both. So it's all of it. It's sugar, flour, fat, salt, meat. It's all of that. Yep.
Okay, so stay away from the cured ham, even if it's low in
That's
fat.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Exactly. And I want to just say, I do not agree with some of the nutritional experts who think that eliminating salt from your diet is a good idea. If you're not eating any processed packaged food, you're actually not going to get enough salt unless you salt your food lightly.
I agree.
So a little bit of salt is fine, but sugar should be eliminated entirely. And I would be careful of the exceedingly sweet fruits, the pineapple. I'd be careful. Mm-hmm. So the meat is a tricky one because there's also research showing that a good 30 grams of protein in a meal also helps the brain lower the body fat set point.
Right.
The trick is like, okay, so some animal protein's okay. I'm not a big fan of animal protein, by the way. I prefer to get a lot of my calories from plants, but I don't think there's any evidence to show that a strictly vegan diet is preferable to a diet that has some animal protein in it. The research is not strong on that either way. However, the question is like, how do you get your meat without so there's like chicken breast and then there's like breakfast sausage, right? In terms of, you just think of the reward value of like, how fatty is that meat? How is it hot dogs? Yeah, don't eat hot dogs. So yeah, you just got to be careful. But yes, plain food, like bland, plain food will allow your brain. And I guess I just want to say I've been eating a pretty bland diet for a long time and it's delicious. I know bland doesn't equate to delicious in most people's minds, but after your taste buds change, like whole real food, like red bell pepper, yum. Mm-hmm. Fresh tomatoes, jicama, a big salad without too much on it, just like apples, oranges, pears, bok choy, like yum. Food is delicious. You don't need to doctor it up too much. And that is bland enough to allow the brain to let you to lose weight.
Now, that's interesting that you say this about adjusting, because this is one of the things I think about a lot. I am a salt addict, big time. And I don't want to use that word lightly around anyone, and especially not someone who's a recovering addict, but I actually am. I can't have a meal without dumping the salt. And it's gotten to a point, exactly as you say, where just to get to normal of tasting things in a meal, I just have to load on the salt to the point where people often comment who eat with me. The problem with it is that I have no negative consequences. My blood pressure is phenomenal. And as you said, if you don't eat refined carbohydrates and sugar and a lot of crap, then your body can actually process it. But I know that I shouldn't be consuming that much sodium. So it's interesting to know that if I just start titrating and working my way down, food will be tastier to me and I won't need to empty salt shakers wherever I go.
So Jonathan, it's really funny. I'm grinning over here because you and I are twinsies. If we went out to eat together, we could go toe to toe, dumping salt on our bananas and apples. Yeah, I salt everything. And what's funny is, I don't know what your blood pressure is, but mine is like 78/55. Like the nurses turn white when they take my blood pressure and ask if I feel okay. Right. And in the past, I've actually cut out salt a couple times and have had really dangerous fainting episodes.
Oh, wow.
So I've got a condition called neurocardiogenic syncope, which is basically church lady fainting syndrome, where it looks like the only treatment for it is to eat copious amounts of salt. So I've been looked in the eye by like a dozen doctors, and all they've said is the only thing we have for you, Susan, is you have to eat a lot of salt. Like take the average amount of salt and then add 6,000 milligrams a day on top of that, and you'll be good. Wow. So I actually carry a little salt shaker in my purse in case I happen to be somewhere needing to eat and there's no salt around, because like you, I can't, like my food doesn't taste right unless it's loaded with salt. So it's funny, having said everything that I said before, before and I say that I eat a bland diet, little asterisk, but I dump a lot of salt on my food. But it seems to me now, so I've talked with some of the world's leading experts who advocate no salt, like Alan Goldhammer at the True North Health Center. And he admitted to me that he agrees that about 1/3 of people are what he calls salt non-retainers, meaning the salt just pisses through their body. Like you could add salt on top of that and your body's not holding it. It's not holding it. And then 2/3 of people hold their salt. They eat a high salt meal and their weight, it goes way up the next day and their body has to do all these compensatory things. But I think, Jonathan, you and I, we're salt non-retainers. And so I don't know that I agree that it's not okay for you to eat all that salt. I want to challenge you and say it might be fine.
That's the conclusion that I've started coming to as well. Not least because, like I said, I feel fine. But here's the weird thing, right? You would expect that I would have a very high liquid requirement. And the truth of the matter is, I don't have to drink that much to be well hydrated and to have clear pee and all that kind of interesting stuff. But if I eat, let's say, that piece of cake that we talked about, which is refined carbohydrates, I'm downing 1.5 liters of water before bed, just dying of thirst. So it's like I'm in touch with my body's thirst and salt just doesn't do it, which I think is even more interesting.
Isn't that interesting? I'm so with you. You're fascinating, dude. I hope we get to meet someday in person.
Yeah. Well, when are you coming back to Israel? We can make that happen.
I have no plans to travel to Israel in the immediate future. Do you ever get to the States?
I do. Where are you based?
New York. I'm in Rochester, but I get down to New York City sometimes, and I go to California a bunch too.
Okay, we can make that happen. We'll sync up because I'm going to be in California about 4 times this year.
Me too. Twins. We'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen. So I know we're coming up on time here. I want to ask you some rapid fire questions if I can.
Okay. All right.
All right.
We'll see what I got.
Easy ones. They're going to be really easy ones.
Okay.
First and foremost, for someone who deals in the brain, favorite pieces of software, i.e. books, that you have installed in your brain?
Well, one of my all-time favorites, Einstein's Dreams. Just a beautiful little piece of prose. So gorgeous. Einstein's Dreams. It's funny you mentioned the Willpower Instinct because Roy Baumeister's book, Willpower, totally changed my life. You know, it's funny, for a morning meditation book, I'm not Christian, but there's this book, Jesus Calling, which is a little morning meditation book. It doesn't feel Christian to me at all. It's like these words of like divine comfort and like God loves you that I just love. So I love that book first thing in the morning. And I'm reading a lot these days. I'm on like my 11th book in 2018.
Wow.
And that's
great.
I don't know when this podcast episode is going to air, but that's like 11 books in 12 weeks or whatever.
Incredible.
I'm reading a lot these days. And
yeah, we should tell people it's 3rd week of March.
3rd week of March.
This will air later in the year, but
okay. Gotcha.
So that's impressive.
Yeah. Okay, that's enough. But anyway, I'm enjoying books these days. I like airport novels, those just the tear it through them, whatever, just like fun romp of murder or, espionage or whatever. I like those books too. I usually read them in a day and a half, but it's a fun checkout from life.
I like that. All right, another rapid fire question. A product or service that you simply could not live without. This one's a little harder.
No, it's not. House cleaning.
House cleaning.
If I had to clean my own toilet, I would shoot myself in the head. And I don't mean to be like a prima donna here, but like I have 3 little kids. I run a massive global movement business, whatever you want to call it. I'm in recovery. I've got a lot of self-care needs and I could not clean my house. I just can't. I couldn't. No.
I agree. Do you have a favorite service or app that you use to get your house clean? Because in the States, I understand you have like Uber for house cleaners.
Oh, no. I mean, I just have somebody who comes regularly and she's amazing and I tip her well and it's just a good thing all around. Yeah.
That is awesome. That was a really easy one. So, Susan, I want to ask next question. Where can people learn more and get in touch with you, and how can people engage with everything that you're doing at Brightline Eating?
Brightlineeating.com. That's BRIGHTLINE, brightlineeating.com. And it's all there. They can take the quiz there. They can do everything there. They can even sign up for the Bootcamp there or the 14-day challenge or whatever.
Fantastical. So I have just one last question before we go to scheduling our lunch date, which is, if people take away just one message and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that to be?
that not everybody's the same when it comes to food. Like some people, if they crave a cookie and they eat that cookie, it makes the craving go away and they're good for days. And other people, if they're craving a cookie and they eat that cookie, it makes them crave more cookies and it slides them down a slippery slope. And the only way they're ever going to have a reasonable chance of being healthy in this life is to completely abstain from sugar and flour. And that's true for some people, not all people. And we got to get that through our heads because we're living in a really toxic food environment and it's not affecting us all equally.
I love that message very, very much. And I would encourage people, obviously, to take that quiz and figure out if any of this stuff has resonated with them, figure out how they can get the help that they need. Susan Peirce Thompson, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I know our audience did, and I hope the next time we record, it'll be in person.
Yay, let's do it, Jonathan. So glad to meet you and so happy to spend this time with you. Truly a pleasure.
Mine as well. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, super friends, that is all we have for you today, but I hope you guys really enjoyed the show and I hope you learned a ton of actionable information, tips, advice that will help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or drop us a quick little note on the Twitter machine at GoSuperhuman. Also, if you have any ideas for anyone out there who you would love to see on the show, we always love to hear your recommendations. You can submit on our website or you can just drop us an email and let us know. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.